My fiancée humiliated me at her corporate party, calling me her personal handyman in front of everyone. Now she lost her promotion, and I expanded my business while she's begging me back. I'm 30 years old, I'm an electrician, and until a few months ago I had my own business that was doing pretty well. I mean, I wasn't getting rich, but I wasn't complaining either. And I thought I was going to marry the love of my life. Spoiler alert, I didn't get married. And what happened at that corporate party basically destroyed a 4-year relationship and made me realize something I should have seen coming a long time ago. But you know how it is? When you're in love, you get kind of blind to the red flags that are right there, screaming in your face. I met Megan when I was 26. She was also 26. And honestly, it was one of those things that felt right from the start, or so I thought. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized company, like corporate but not a mega corporation, and I had just opened my electrician business about a year before. My first years were tough. I'm not gonna lie, there were months where I barely made enough to pay rent and buy materials, but I loved what I did. I loved being my own boss, having my truck with my name painted on the side, hiring my first employee when things got better. For me, it was the American dream. You know what I mean? Starting from the bottom and building something with your own hands, literally. The first 2 years with Megan were good, or at least I thought they were good. We'd go out on weekends, watch shows together, she'd stay at my apartment or I'd stay at hers, normal couple stuff. But looking back, there were already signs that she saw my work differently than I did. Like, when her friends asked what I did for a living, she'd say, "He's an electrician," with a tone that I don't know, like she was explaining something embarrassing but trying to sound casual. Or when we talked about future plans and I mentioned expanding the business, hiring more people, she'd change the subject quickly or say something like, "Yeah, sure, but you could also consider other options." Right? And I always thought, what other options? This is my job. It's what I know how to do. It's what I like. About 2 years ago, Megan got a promotion at her company. She became a marketing manager or something like that. I don't remember the exact title, but basically she started making more money and having more responsibilities. And that's fine. I mean, I was happy for her. I really was. And the problem is that, with that promotion, came a change in her personality that, at first I didn't notice much, but that became more and more obvious. She started talking differently, dressing differently, caring more about appearances and what her colleagues thought of her. Suddenly everything was networking, and corporate events and dinners with clients. And I, with my calloused hands and my truck full of tools, started to feel like I didn't fit into this world she was building. The condescending comments became more frequent. Like, when people came over and something broke, she'd say, "Good thing I have my own personal handyman," with a little laugh that sounded like she was making a joke, but that hit me like a punch in the stomach. Or when we talked about money, she'd mention how much she was making now and then ask, "And how's the business going for you?" with a tone that clearly implied I wasn't making enough. The truth is, I was making good money. Not as much as her, but good. And besides, my business was growing every year. But for her, that wasn't enough. Or it wasn't glamorous enough, I guess. A year ago, I proposed to her because I thought that's what we had to do after 3 years together. And she said yes. I bought a ring that cost me like 3 months of savings. It wasn't a giant diamond, but it wasn't cheap either. And when I gave it to her, she seemed happy. But then she started making weird comments about the wedding, like she wanted something elegant, that her colleagues were going to be there, that it had to be at a nice place because she couldn't look bad in front of her boss. And I thought, since when is a wedding to impress your boss? But anyway, I went along with it because I wanted her to be happy. What happened last December was the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. Megan's company threw their year-end party, one of those fancy corporate parties at a hotel, with a sit-down dinner and open bar and live music. Megan insisted for weeks that I had to go, that it was super important that I accompany her, that all her colleagues were bringing their partners and she couldn't be the only one without company. I really didn't want to go because those corporate parties give me like anxiety. I don't know what to talk about with people who work in cubicles all day. But I finally agreed because, well, she was my fiancée, and supposedly that's what you do when you love someone, right? You go to boring events to support them. I put on my only suit, which I bought like 5 years ago for my grandfather's funeral, and that still fit me well, luckily. And we arrived at the hotel. The place was nice. I'm not gonna lie, like huge ballroom with round tables and elegant centerpieces and all that. As soon as we walked in, Megan went into full networking mode, greeting everyone, introducing me to her colleagues, and that's when I started to notice that something was very wrong. Every time she introduced me, she'd say something like, "This is Alex. He's an electrician, basically my personal handyman. Ha ha ha." Or, "If something breaks at home, you know who to call." And people would laugh, like uncomfortable little laughs. And I'd just stand there with a forced smile, thinking, is she seriously doing this? During dinner, it got worse. We were sitting at a table with her boss, the company's marketing director, and other managers with their partners. The conversation was about travel and investments, and I don't know what else. Topics that were clearly designed to make me feel out of place. At one point, someone asked what I did, and before I could answer, Megan jumped in and said, "Alex is our savior. When the power goes out or when the fridge makes weird noises, right, honey?" And everyone laughed, and I just stayed quiet because I didn't know what to say without sounding defensive or bitter. But inside, I was boiling. I felt like my face was turning red and my hands were sweating, and all I wanted was to get out of there. The worst came during the toasts. Turns out they had prepared some kind of program where some outstanding employees gave short speeches thanking the company and talking about their achievements of the year. Megan was one of those outstanding employees because she had led an important campaign or something like that. She went up to the small stage they had set up, took the microphone, and started her speech. She talked about her work, about her team, about her goals for the next year, all very professional. And then, towards the end, she said something that still makes my blood boil when I remember it. She said, "And I want to thank my fiancé Alex, who's here. Tonight, he's an electrician. So if anyone needs their dishwasher repaired, you know who to call." And literally, the whole room laughed. Laughed. Like it was the joke of the year. I sat there, with that fake smile still plastered on my face, but inside something broke. I don't know how to explain it. It was like suddenly everything made sense. All the condescending comments from the past few years, all the times she minimized my work or made me feel less than. And the worst part is she did it publicly, in front of all those people, in front of her boss and her colleagues, as if it was completely acceptable to make fun of me like that. Like my work, my business, everything I had built, was a joke. When she finished her speech and came back to the table, she was all smiles and excited, expecting me to congratulate her, I guess. But I got up, told her I needed air, and walked out of the ballroom. I went to the parking lot and stood there next to my truck, that truck with my name painted on. It that for me represented years of hard work, and tried to process what had just happened. I wasn't sad. I was furious. I was humiliated. And I was done. Megan came out a few minutes later, all confused, asking what was wrong with me, why I had walked out like that. And I said, "Are you seriously asking me what's wrong? You just humiliated me in front of all those people. You used me as the punchline of your speech." And she, instead of apologizing or at least showing some empathy, looked at me like I was overreacting and said, "God, Alex, it was just a joke. Relax. It's not that big a deal." And I said, "Yes, it is a big deal, Megan. You've been treating me like my job is something to be ashamed of. Ever since you got that promotion, like I'm not good enough for you, because I don't work in an office wearing a suit every day." She got defensive, started saying that I was being dramatic, that she had never said anything bad about my job, that I was interpreting everything wrong. But then I asked her directly, "Are you ashamed of what I do?" And there was a long silence, like 5 seconds, that felt like 5 minutes, and in that silence, I knew the answer. Finally, she said, "It's not that I'm ashamed, but you have to admit, it's not exactly glamorous, right? My colleagues are lawyers and consultants and people who have master's degrees, and you, well, you fix wires." And that's when I realized this was beyond repair. I took off the engagement ring I was wearing. Yeah, I also wore a ring because she insisted we both wear engagement rings, and gave it back to her. I said, "I'm not going to marry someone who thinks my job is inferior or who uses me as a joke to impress her bosses. It's over." And she just stood there with the ring in her hand, eyes wide open. and I think in that moment she realized she had really screwed up. She started stammering something about how she didn't mean it like that I was misinterpreting, but I was already walking back to the ballroom to get my jacket that I had left on the chair. When I walked back in, several people looked at me weird, including Megan's boss, who was standing near our table. I grabbed my jacket, and Megan came in behind me, all flustered, trying to talk quietly but clearly stressed. Her boss came over and asked if everything was okay, and I don't know what came over me, but I said, "Everything's perfect. I'm just ending my engagement with your marketing manager here because apparently my electrician job isn't good enough for her." And then I left. Just like that. I left Megan standing there with her boss and her colleagues watching the whole scene. The next few days were chaos. Megan called me like 1,000 times, sent me messages, showed up at my apartment trying to talk, but I didn't want to talk, honestly. I was processing everything, not just what happened at the party, but all the previous years where I ignored the signs, and the more I thought about it, the clearer I saw that she had never really respected me. She never valued my work or understood what it meant to me. For her, I was the handyman boyfriend who was useful when things broke, but who wasn't at her professional level. That what ended up convincing me I had done the right thing was when she started posting stuff on social media, like indirect posts about the importance of communication in relationships and about how some people can't handle a joke. Basically, she was painting me as the bad guy in the story, like I had overreacted and ruined everything by being too sensitive. Her friends commented with supportive emojis and messages like, "You deserve better," and I read all that thinking, wow, she really doesn't get it at all. But then something interesting happened. A colleague of Megan's, someone I had talked to briefly at the party, sent me a message on Instagram. He said he wanted me to know that many people at the company thought what Megan did was wrong, that it was inappropriate and humiliating. He told me that Megan always talked about me condescendingly at the office, that she had made comments about how I wasn't as successful as her colleagues, and that several of them felt uncomfortable with the way she treated me. That made me feel a little better, knowing I wasn't crazy, that other people had also seen what I was experiencing. Then came something even more revealing. Megan's best friend, who I thought I had a good relationship with during all those years, called me one night. She was crying, very upset, and told me she needed to tell me something she had been keeping to herself for a long time. She told me that Megan had always thought I was easy to control, that she had gotten engaged to me because she thought I would never challenge or contradict her, that she actually thought she had settled by being with me, but didn't want to be alone while building her career. The friend told me, "You deserve to know because you're a good person and she treated you horribly, and I can't keep being her." Friend, knowing she never really valued you. That conversation destroyed me, but also freed me. You know what I mean? Because it confirmed everything I had started to suspect. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being dramatic. Megan really saw me as inferior and had been using our relationship until it was convenient for her to find someone more in line with her new corporate status. And knowing that, even though it hurt, helped me move forward without doubts or regrets. I decided to take a few days off and went alone to the mountains, to a cabin that a client of mine had and lent me when I told him roughly what had happened. I spent like 5 days there, hiking, thinking, basically doing a mental reset, and that's where I realized how much I had sacrificed of myself trying to fit into the version of life that Megan wanted. I had stopped hanging out with my friends from the trade because she thought they were too basic. I had stopped playing basketball on Saturdays because she wanted me to accompany her to brunches with her colleagues. I had stopped talking proudly about my business because I got tired of her passive-aggressive comments. When I came back to the city, I felt different. Lighter, I guess. I blocked Megan everywhere. Asked, through a mutual friend, to pick up the few things she had at my apartment, and basically erased her from my life. It wasn't easy, because I still loved her on some level, or at least loved the person I thought she was, but I knew I couldn't go back to someone who had disrespected me like that. The funny thing, and when I say funny I mean that irony of the universe, is that a few months later I found out that Megan faced professional consequences for what happened. Turns out her boss wasn't very impressed with the public drama at the party, and when it came time for the next promotion she was expecting, they gave it to someone else. Someone told me there were comments at the company about her lack of professionalism and about how she had handled the situation. I'm not gonna lie. I felt a bit of satisfaction hearing that, though I also felt a little sorry for her because I know her career was super important to her. But well, actions have consequences, right? As for me, things have been going well. I expanded my business, hired 2 more electricians and someone to handle the administrative part. I started teaching evening classes at a community college teaching electrical fundamentals, and that's given me a satisfaction I didn't expect. I reconnected with my friends, went back to playing basketball on Saturdays, basically recovered the parts of my life I had let die. I went out with a couple of girls, but nothing serious, and that's okay for now. I'm not in a hurry to commit to someone again. Last week, I was installing an electrical panel in a new house, and the owner, a guy who works in finance or something like that, said to me, "I have to admit, I always thought electrician work was simple, but watching you work, I realize how much knowledge and skill it requires." He asked me about my business, about how I got into this, and we talked for like half an hour while I worked. In the end, he gave me an extra tip and said, "We need more people like you, who do honest work and do it well." And that random conversation with a client made me feel more valued than 4 years with Megan. I don't know if I'll ever commit to someone again. I don't know if I'll find a person who really values what I do and isn't ashamed to introduce me as their partner. But what I do know is that I'm not going to settle for someone who treats me like a second option or who uses my work as a joke. I've worked too hard to build my business and my life to let someone make me feel less than. And if that means being alone for a while, well, that's fine. I prefer that to being with someone who doesn't respect me. I guess the lesson here, if there is any lesson, is that mutual respect is the foundation of any relationship. Without that, it doesn't matter how much love there is or how many years you've been together, eventually everything's going to fall apart. And the signs are always there, you just have to be willing to see them instead of ignoring them because you're afraid of being alone or because you think things are going to magically get better. They don't get better. If someone doesn't value you from the beginning, they're not going to start doing it just because you put a ring on their finger. Oh, and one more thing. About a month ago, I saw that Megan deleted all the photos of us from her social media and posted a photo with a new guy, someone who, according to my detective work on Instagram, works in consulting or something corporate like her. And you know what? I didn't feel anything. Not sadness, not anger, not jealousy. I just thought, well, I hope this time she finds someone who fits into her perfect world of suits and fancy titles. And then I went back to what I was doing, which was quoting a new job for a client. Because at the end of the day, my life and my work and my business are still important, and I don't need anyone's validation anymore to feel proud of who I am.